members who have joined us this afternoon and our witnesses from the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. I declare open this public hearing on the Joint Standing Committee on Treaties for its inquiry into the agreement to establish the Pacific Resilience Facility. I begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today and pay my respects to elders both past and present. I also like to extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples who might be joining us today. In accordance with the committee's resolution of 31 July 2025, this hearing will be broadcast and proof and official transcripts of the proceedings will be published on the Parliament's website. I remind all present, as Chair, I will ensure that the proceedings are conducted in an orderly and respectful and courteous way. On that note, I do acknowledge that most of us are joining via online and remote, so please make sure that you use the hand function or text message or signal message if you wish to raise a question for any of our witnesses today. I remind members of the media for the need to fair and accurate reporting of the proceedings of the committee. I now welcome representatives of the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade to give evidence today. For the Hansard record, would you please state your full name and the capacity in which you are appearing before the committee?
Will Nankervis, Ambassador for Climate Change.
Sandra A. Anson, Assistant Director, Pacific Climate, Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, and I had the privilege of leading the negotiations for this treaty.
Alexandra Perry, Treaty Manager from the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade.
Thank you. Although the committee does not require you to give evidence under oath, this hearing is a legal proceeding of the Parliament and therefore has the same standing as the proceedings of the respective houses. The giving of false or misleading evidence is a serious matter and may be regarded as contempt of Parliament. The evidence given today will be recorded in Hansard and attracts parliamentary privilege. It is the responsibility of witnesses to accurately record any questions on notice that are taken. Would you like to make an opening statement before we proceed to discussion and questions from committee members?
Yes, please, Chair.
Please proceed.
Thanks, Chair. Chair, as a Pacific nation, Australia is a partner the region can count on. We recognise Pacific stewardship of vast ocean territories, deep cultural traditions and resilient spirit make the region unique in the world. We work hand in hand because we share an ocean and we share a future. The Pacific region has long affirmed that climate change remains the single greatest threat to livelihoods, security and well-being of the peoples of the Pacific. We've listened and we're working together on Pacific-led Australian-backed solutions. The Pacific Resilience Facility, or PRF, is one such solution. It's a genuine Pacific offering to fill a critical gap in the climate finance architecture, designed by Pacific leaders for Pacific communities. It's a landmark Pacific-owned trust fund that focuses on small-scale, community-level resilience projects that often struggle to secure predictable financing from existing mechanisms. Projects will target small, practical, high-impact resilience activities that respond to the immediate needs of Pacific communities across climate adaptation, disaster preparedness, community-level loss and damage needs, and nature-based solutions. While the facility is yet to be operational, pending entry into force of the treaty, examples of priority projects could be improving outer island water security by increasing rainwater harvesting, retrofitting evacuation centres to be more cyclone-proof, or establishing mangrove nurseries to slow coastal erosion. The treaty before the committee today operationalises the PRF. It establishes the PRF as an international organisation with the legal personality necessary to manage funds, enter agreements, hire staff, and operate independently and transparently. Importantly, it enshrines key governance features that Pacific leaders have championed, a council composed of Pacific Island countries, including Australia, ensuring local leadership over priorities, a focus on grant financing, not loans, to avoid adding to debt burdens, an independent board ensuring fiduciary and reporting standards, giving contributors confidence their investments are effective and accountable, and a commitment to community-level adaptation and resilience, ensuring funds reach the people whose lives and livelihoods depend on them. Australia was pleased to join with 15 Pacific Island Forum members to sign the agreement to establish the Pacific Resilience Facility at the Pacific Islands Forum Leaders Meeting in Honiara in September 2025. Prior to this, we worked closely with Pacific partners over several years through technical design workshops, legal drafting sessions and regional consultation to help bring the PRF to fruition. Our support reflects our shared interest in a stable, prosperous and resilient region. It sends an important signal that Australia backs Pacific leadership and Pacific priorities and is committed to supporting the region's long-term resilience and stability as climate pressures intensify. The PRF has been designed with high levels of integrity through a deliberately robust, multi-layered governance framework. While it's a unique arrangement for the Pacific and a new arrangement provides a strong layered system of governance, financial oversight and audit assurance that manages risk comprehensively. Ratifying this agreement will allow Australia to become a founding member, to contribute to the PRF with a formal legal basis and to help shape its early years. The PRF aligns squarely with Australia's own development and climate policies. It complements our bilateral programs, our humanitarian and disaster preparedness work, and our support for regional institutions. Chair, the PRF is a practical, Pacific-led response to a shared challenge. The treaty before you enshrines the governance, legal structure and operational integrity that will allow the PRF to succeed. Australia's ratification will demonstrate our deep and enduring commitment to fostering a more resilient Pacific for the safety and security of our region's future. Let me end, Chair, with the words of Prime Minister Albanese at the Pacific Island Forum Leaders Meeting in Honiara in September. This is more than a fund, it's a promise to Pacific communities that they will not face climate threats alone. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that opening statement. As you've highlighted, this is quite a unique treaty and it's the first that has actually come before our particular committee. I'm just going to jump first to the member for Sturt who's indicated that she has a few questions, and then I'll see who else has got questions from the committee members that have joined us today. So over to you, member for Sturt. We're just still on mute there, Claire. We're just trying to, we've just still got you on mute there. I'll just check with the department, see we haven't deliberately muted everyone. All right, okay, well, I might jump in there whilst we work through those IT issues. So this is the first of its kind. I guess what I wanted to go to, because it's quite unique, it mentions in there that the ability for other nations to be able to contribute. Can you give us any indication as to where those negotiations might be? Would Australia be involved in agreeing or disagreeing, depending upon who those other potential donor states could be? And talk us a bit about sort of, if we were to ratify this, what happens next?
So perhaps I'll start and then throw to colleagues. Chair, I think probably your question goes partly to progress on capitalisation to date. So the target, Chair, initial capitalisation target is $500 million, but the end target is $1.5 billion. To date, 14 donors have pledged a total of $173 million to the PRF. So those countries are Australia, Canada, China, France, Germany, Ireland, Japan, importantly Nauru as a Pacific Island country and Solomon Islands, New Zealand, Portugal, Saudi Arabia, the United States, and also Taiwan. Of course, our $100 million commitment is the largest to date. We hope to achieve the balance of $387 million by the end of this year, Chair, to get to that $500 million target. We're really committed to partnering with the Pacific to showcase the PRF this year. This is a special year in that we and the Pacific will play a key role in COP31, the 31st Conference of the Parties. So we are deploying our diplomatic network to highlight the merits of the PRF and advocate for additional pledges, including at a session which will take place at COP31 in Turkey this year, a session on the climate finance needs of small island developing states, which will, according to the agreement that we reached with Turkey on COP31 hosting, provide a platform for world leaders and others to make commitments to the PRF. So that's on capitalisation, Chair, and other countries' contributions and commitments, and happy to go into detail on that. In terms of next steps, I guess there are a couple of different elements. There's what happens in relation to the PRF, and then there's our treaty-making process. So maybe...
So perhaps if I could add, Chair, I think part of your question goes to the council members' ability to interact with those who might make pledges or provide finance to the Pacific Resilience Facility. So the multi-layered governance framework ensures strong oversight of both operations and investment activities. And at the highest level, the council sets the parameters for the financial and operational risk determined collectively by member countries. So that includes the risk tolerance and approving key documents such as the risk appetite statement, the investment statement, and importantly, the contributions policy. And I think that's the policy document that would answer your questions in terms of where that sits in the governance structure. There might be instances where a funding promise into the PRF was something that member countries had concerns over, and that would be articulated in that contributions policy, which is at the council level.
So this is quite specific for the Pacific. It's a bit of a unique, as in using your terms. Is it likely there to be similar arrangements elsewhere in the world, or is this, given the nature of what's happening in the Pacific and climate change, really just a once-off treaty that will be done specifically for this region?
Sure.
Yeah, so I think Pacific leaders chose an investment fund model of this type because communities in the Pacific need predictable and long-term funding, as opposed to perhaps one-off grants. And so holding the capital and using the earnings creates a steady annual flow of small grants, and this reflects the long-term vision of Pacific leaders who designed the PRF not just for today's projects but also for the next generation, recognising that resilience must be built and maintained over decades. In terms of other parts of the world taking up something similar, not aware of it specifically.
And maybe I could...
Great. We can now go to Senator Collins. Oh, sorry, did you have something further to add? Sorry about that.
Just to add, Chair, that, I mean, there are a range of climate funds that are in existence, including that support projects to the Pacific. The Green Climate Fund is one of them. But the PRF is completely different to that. It fills a completely different niche, and it's driven in part by the difficulty that we hear from Pacific Island nations in accessing some of those larger funds, which are broader multilateral funds and much different in scale. So this is unique in that it's Pacific owned and Pacific designed, and as my colleague said, designed to really provide kind of simple, predictable, small-scale community resilience funding. So it fills a unique niche, and it's uniquely designed for Pacific in light of their experience with some of the larger funds.
Okay, thank you for that. We'll now go to Senator Collins. So thank you, Senator Collins.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to those appearing today. I've just got a few questions, I guess, on the design of the treaty and how it's going to be implemented, but just to follow on from a comment that you made before that you'll need another $387 million to reach a target of $500 million. What happens if you do not reach that $500 million? Will you still be looking to disperse the interest payments into grants?
Fortunately, some of the grants that have been provided to date for the Pacific Resilience Facility, some will go into the investment fund and be earning interest and earnings for small-scale projects, but some will also go directly into a grants window. So some donors have elected to provide their funding in that way. So we anticipate that early years will utilise those kind of on-granting or pass-through grants, if you like, that type of funding to enable the interest and earnings to grow over time. And we certainly have strong ambitions to work with the Pacific Islands Forum Secretariat on their advocacy and the advocacy around linking with COP31 and hosting of the pre-COP in the Pacific that will give us that platform to support opportunities for further pledges from like-minded donors.
Okay. But if you don't reach that $500 million, does that mean that you can't disperse the interest off that money? Is that what you're saying? I just need to be clear about that.
Yeah, I think the modelling, it's hard to give definitive elements in line with where the modelling stands. But there is indications of kind of where the break-even point is. We're not at that break-even point yet, but heading towards it.
So what do you mean by that?
So in the interim, some of the funds that have been pledged can be used for grants. So yes, the facility can begin undertaking projects. But there's the broader question of how much capitalisation is needed to be able to start making grants from the interest. I think that's the question, Senator. And I'm not sure if we have an exact answer for you on that, Sandra.
Not a clear answer, no.
Is that the way it was going to work is that you were going to raise the capital and only disperse the interest payments from that capital. So, the money that is raised from, 20 different donors, whatever it was, 12 different donors, that wasn't actually going to be dispersed. It was just the interest on that capital. Is that correct?
Yes, for the most part, but there are some donors. So Austria and Portugal have made pledges that will go straight into on-granting. So, for example, in 2027, where we anticipate the small grants would commence, that funding would be utilised first to enable a time period that could allow the funds to accumulate while the capital contributions are coming in.
So your understanding's correct, Senator, but there's an additional grant window in addition to the mechanism that you mentioned.
Okay, thank you. I will ask on that just very quickly before I move on. Which particular bank where this money is being held? Where's the all the collected funds? Where's that being held?
So a key part of the risk management is the appointment and oversight of the fund manager. The fund manager would be selected by the board, and there'd be a trustee or custodian who would hold the Pacific Resilience Facility property. So that's not likely to be held within the Pacific. It would be held offshore. And the board will have the power to appoint and monitor, could dismiss the fund manager, and can commission independent reviews on its performance. So the separation of functions ensures that investment decisions are made by professional experts, but held firmly accountable by the board. In addition, the board could appoint an independent auditor and overseeing the internal audit program, which together provide continuous scrutiny of financial reporting, internal controls and compliance.
Okay, so who's going to be appointed to the board? How's that put together? What's the makeup? Are all the 5 countries represented? How does it work?
Yeah. So the intention is to, perhaps starting at the highest level, the council is made up of political representatives from Pacific Island, from PRF members, most likely ministers of finance or equivalent, and then they appoint the independent board. There's a plan to undertake employ KPMG to do a talent search to find potential board members, and they could include board members from outside of the region. The important things for consideration in that selection will be that they have the required skills and expertise to undertake that role. And one of the things that's important from our perspective is to make sure that that board has the right balance across, on the financial side, investment skills and experience, but also small grant implementation experience and appropriate relevant skills to ensure the makeup of that board can achieve its outcomes.
And on the due diligence side of things, where does all the reporting go to? Who does the board report to, and council?
The board would report to the council.
And then the council, so the council is made up of a representative from every single Pacific Island Forum member?
From every PRF member, so those who've ratified and are part of the treaty.
Question on there's a lot of donors from outside the PRF and outside PIF. Will they have access to that financial reporting? As a donor, you're going to be given a lot of money to this, you'd probably expect that. Is that correct?
Yeah, certainly there's plans for the type of transparency that you would expect from an organisation of this type, to provide that both publicly for good transparency, but also to keep donors informed and very conscious of the need for that with so many donors from outside of the region.
Okay. So there's a lot of donors from outside. There's also, as we heard, Solomon Islands and Nauru that have already donated to the fund. You've got a clause in here that says that, there will be no prejudices in how the grants are given out to PRF member countries. But how do you ensure that? How do you ensure that countries aren't being favoured over another? And how do you decide how these community projects will be chosen?
So there's an allocations policy that's in development, and for the most part has, it's not final yet, because it's really the board's power to approve that allocations policy, but it's got good support to date from member countries. And it goes through a number of steps, looking at size and then waiting for vulnerabilities to weight up the allocations that would go to smaller island states.
So donations to the facility will not have any kind of impact on, so, you know, Nauru and Solomon Islands have given money already. That's not going to impact the decisions on where the grants are first dispersed to?
No, not linked.
No?
Those two things are not linked.
Okay. Will there be any local content rules on the tenders for the jobs?
Certainly, when it gets to that level, there'd be, you know, procurement policies are relevant. But these are small grants. They're at the kind of US dollar $20,000 to $50,000 mark, and so, you know, they're intended to benefit communities, and certainly using procurement policies to do that is one way, absolutely.
I think it's a pretty important part of these local community jobs too, because we have seen before that, you know, through particular grant programs that those local content rules haven't been applied, and I think at this community level that is absolutely important, especially when you've got so many donors contributing to this from outside the Pacific region. Okay, that's it from me. Thank you very much. Oh, actually, just one final question. I understand the IFFP has had some teething issues with the way that it disperses grants and loans in the region. Will you be learning any lessons as you implement this, or in the design of this as you're going through? Have you been learning any lessons from the IFFP?
Absolutely, Senator. We and, you know, Sandra and her team have consulted pretty broadly across the department, including the AIFFP and the design of this process, and we'll continue to stay in touch with them to learn those lessons or benefit from the lessons that they have learned, Senator.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Okay, thank you very much, Senator Collins. We'll now go to the member for Sturt, who has some questions. So thank you, Claire.
Thank you, Chair, and apologies everyone for the audio issues I had a bit earlier. Thank you all for being here. My questions are in a similar vein to Senator Collins. I just wanted to clarify a few things. So Australia's contributed $100 million to this facility. How and when and who will make decisions about future contributions that Australia might make, or is that not anticipated because of the way the investment income is going to fund the grants, leaving the capital sum untouched?
I mean, you're right, Senator, that once the way that the model works, once we reach capitalisation, then it's the interest that will be used to be funding the programs. But I mean, any decision on a future contribution would be made by the government.
Mm-hmm. And would that be the same for the other, I guess, non-member external donors? If just to call it a third-party country wanted to make another donation, that would obviously be a matter for them, and that would be accepted, or is this sort of it that, you know, whatever it was, 500 million capital sum is all that's required?
Senator, that would be a matter for them, but it's certainly something that we're encouraging.
Yeah.
So that will be a big focus for us this year, you know, in general, but including as part of our role in COP31 and the pre-COP, which will be held in the Pacific, and COP31 itself in Turkey. So we'll certainly be looking for new donors, additional donors, but we would also welcome existing donors or those who've pledged funds already to pledge further funds.
Yeah, and that's great. Sometimes I think with donations and pledges of this nature, they do come with perhaps unsaid expectations and unsaid conditions about how funds will be used and directed. And I did wonder, did you have any insight into the motivations of the current list of donors, just noting that most of them are not actually regional? So I read that list with with interest. What's the motivation for, Germany, Portugal to make these sorts of donations? I can understand the US. I think that's a bit more obvious, but I do have concerns about conditions being attached to donations and how would that be managed.
So, Senator, these are all countries with various degrees of relationship with the Pacific region, but many of them, or all of them, also have climate finance commitments, as does Australia. So this contribution will go to their contributions and their obligations in relation to climate finance. We've also been involved very extensively in the outreach to these countries. So, Australia's engagement is a factor. The engagement of other Pacific countries is a factor, and relationships with the Pacific Islands Forum and the members of the Pacific is a factor. Of course, the Pacific is an important voice on climate, regionally but globally. Very active in UNFCCC processes, very active in the United Nations, where, of course, I think Pacific countries make up probably, I think the number is around 14 of the UN member states. So a lot of different interests from different countries in engagement with the Pacific, but also engagement with climate finance more broadly.
Okay, that's helpful. And just one more, if I may, Chair. Am I right in just something you said in answer to a question from Senator Collins, was the grants themselves will be determined pursuant to an allocation policy which is being developed, and then that will be under the jurisdiction of the board. And stop me if I'm not right on that. Once a small grant, sort of noting it's between 20 to 50 grand, is issued, who then manages that, and who sort of manages the project that the grant money is being used for? And if the project is not, running on schedule, or there's a whole range of issues could come up with the project despite the relatively small amount of money, who manages that from a governance probity perspective?
Yes, thank you for the question. So the PRF intends to put money through national governments and also through community service organisations, which percentage of how much to each is not quite finally worked out, but there's consultations going on with national governments to look at the grant-making mechanisms that they might already be utilising, perhaps for other funding opportunities that exist already, and how to maximise linkages with those national systems to support the implementation of those grants. There is an obligation on member countries receiving PRF finance that they need to spend that in accordance with the rules in accordance with the purposes and objectives of the treaty, found at Article 3 of the treaty. And I suppose what I would say is that the ultimate measure of the PRF success would be the improved resilience of communities to climate change and disasters, achieved through community-level adaptation, disaster resilience, enhanced human capacities, increased equity, livelihoods and sustainable development. And PRF will work quite closely with national governments of PRF member countries to achieve that together.
And when will the allocations policy be finalised, roughly?
Yeah, so lots of these policies exist in draft already, but they're not approved until the board can approve them, because that's the power of the board to approve the allocations policy. We don't have a board until we have a council, and we don't have a council until we have the treaty enter into force.
Yeah, chicken, egg, horse, cart, yeah. Any rough idea about what it might, not timeframes, but what it might say?
Yeah, so it will have percentages that each member country are entitled to.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, great, thanks. Next we have some questions from the member for Bowman, Mr Pike.
Thank you, Chair. Where are we expecting that the PRF will be headquartered?
Yep. So perhaps if I take a step back in my answer, if I may. So in 2023, Pacific Island Forum leaders, as part of their outcomes, made a declaration in relation to the Pacific Resilience Facility. And then in the following year, there was a process in 2024 which would find where it would be headquartered. And several countries nominated for the headquarters, and Tonga, the Kingdom of Tonga, was successful. So it'll be headquartered in the Kingdom of Tonga.
And do we have any sort of sense as to what sort of scale of a secretariat it's going to have to maintain? I mean, how many would that, would we be talking 50 people, 20 people? What sort of expectation is there?
Around 10.
Okay, right. And I'm assuming they'd be not just all be Tongans, there'd be, I imagine, a few Australians involved in that as well.
Yeah, look, I think that's possible, or just from other Pacific nations. At the moment, perhaps if I could say at the moment, it's headquartered in, it's transitioning from being housed at the Pacific Islands Forum Secretariat in Suva. And so at the moment, the makeup of the team is a lot of Fijians and others.
And they're the ones that are working on the provisional policies, if you like, that might be adopted in due course. Are we expecting every PIF state to sign up? There aren't any issues then?
So, Senator, most of the PIF members have signed the agreement. So 15 of the 18 have signed. The last 3 that haven't signed are French Polynesia, New Caledonia and Samoa. In Samoa's case, this was just a matter of timing. So the signing event coincided with the formation of a new government following their national elections. And the French territories, so French Polynesia and New Caledonia, have a more complex treaty-making process.
Does that have to go via Paris, does it?
Senator, it of course.
I'll stop you there. I'm not a senator. I work for a living.
Okay. It's related to the status of those members, Senator, in relation to France. Yes.
But we're not there's no one's expressed any objection to it. It's going through as we anticipate. Yes. Yeah.
Correct.
There's been a bit of mention in the paperwork around external audits and monitoring. I'm just wondering, is that something that's built in within the treaty itself, or is that just an expectation that we're going to have, a rigorous process of analysing, and auditing, and just monitoring performance? I'll just add, I noted the measures of success that were mentioned in the answer to the previous questioner. Obviously a lot of those things are quite amorphous and subjective. So I'm just keen to understand what sort of structure we're going to have to analyse the expenditure and whether it's achieving value for money. But secondly, really how we're going to determine whether what sort of projects are actually the sort of ones that we want to be investing in through this process.
Thank you for the question. I think the answer is relates to the hierarchy of documents and policies that exist, as well as then how they're implemented. And so at the moment we've got the treaty and before you today, and then below that there's a rules of procedure document which has been negotiated with member countries as well, ready for adoption by the Council at its inaugural meeting. And then the Council delegates some powers to the Board for the further development of policies, many of which are already in draft form. And then it's the Board's responsibility to then appoint independent auditors and to manage that aspect with the support of the Audit Committee, which is a committee that the Board must establish. So there is certainly plans within the structure for these things to eventuate, and they are in train to ensure that the Pacific Leaders' vision of a robust and defensible organisation is what we're establishing.
Okay. Thanks, Chair. That's all from me.
Hey, I'll just check to see if we've got any final questions from anyone this afternoon. Yes, we have Alison. So thank you, Alison. The member.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry about the glare from the back. I've had to put my laptop on charge. I just want to go back to the Secretariat. Australia have an expectation on costs, operating costs? Is there a percentage of our contribution that the government is happy to accept would be a contribution to the running costs of the Board and the Secretariat?
Thank you. If I may, over time, there's an expectation that the operations of the PRF as an organisation would also be met by the interest and earnings that was earned off the capital. So I think into the longer term, that's how the operations of the PRF would be funded. But in the short term, there's a number of donors who are supporting PRF's establishment, Australia, the UK, the United States and others.
Yeah, I guess the issue being how are we going to keep a check on the operating cost of the Secretariat? I mean, this is, there are a lot of competing claims for Australian dollars, both domestically and internationally, and the expectation will be obviously that the intention of the treaty is delivered on the ground, but how do we make sure that the percentage of operating costs is a small proportion of any interest earned of the initial contribution? Because cost blowout will be, bad PR essentially for the facility. So how is the government going to keep an eye on those to make sure that they don't blow out?
Yeah, certainly. So I think it'll be it's the Board that's responsible for the day-to-day operations of the PRF, and that holds that accountability. And the board would report to the Council. So Australia will have oversight of those as the organisation matures. And certainly it would be something that in all of our investments, certainly prudent value for money is part of what we're trying to achieve.
But there's no expectation, establishment costs or anything. There's no sort of, ceiling in terms of what Australia's prepared to accept as reasonable operating establishment costs to get the thing going.
Well, it's a collective model. So, you know, Australia certainly has a voice within the governance framework to assure effective delivery.
Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Sorry, I forgot mute. Sorry, everybody.
I just had
one last call for questions. We have one from the member, Maribyrnong. Thanks, Joe. You'll be our last for this hearing.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to take this opportunity as a final question. Really appreciate the time and effort you've gone into in terms of taking us through some of the details of how this will work and our role in it. But taking a step back and thinking about and this sort of refers to some of the opening remarks that you made around our role in the Pacific and our role in supporting our Pacific neighbours in this space, as well as in particular around climate change. Can you provide some overarching commentary around how this particular effort and work that we are doing in this space and driving this work is helping with our overall relationships with our Pacific neighbours, and how we're using this as an opportunity to rebuild some of those relationships?
Thanks for the question. I think the government's been very clear that the starting point for our engagement in the Pacific is listening. So really listening and responding to Pacific priorities. And I think the PRF is a really strong example of that. It's been born of consultation and the consistent message that we have been receiving from Pacific Island countries, that some of the big climate funds aren't meeting their needs, they're difficult to access, they're not responsive. So this is a response to that. It's really driven by the region, owned by the region, and I think Australia's sort of cornerstone contribution and the role we've played in the establishment of the PRF, you know, technical support, but also our role working with our Pacific partners in encouraging contributions and capitalisation, that goes to our broader relationships and, you know, I think is acknowledged by Pacific partners. It ties in with COP31 and what we're seeking to achieve this year. So the outcome that we achieved with Turkey on COP31 has broadly been welcomed by the Pacific, and the fact that the agreement with Turkey explicitly mentions capitalisation of the PRF, and this session in Antalya has been part of that response, positive response from the Pacific to that outcome.
Excellent, thank you. No further from me, Chair.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that discussion and for answering the questions that the committee members have. Thank you for your attendance today, and you will be sent a copy of the transcript of your evidence, and we'll have an opportunity to request corrections to any transcript errors. If you've been asked to provide any additional information, you'll please forward to the Secretariat by the close of business, Friday 26. So thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
And we will just take a quick pause, just double check the process. Witnesses here, and we've still got quorum present. So I declare open this public hearing on the Joint Standing Committee on Treaties for its inquiry into the Council of Europe contravention on the manipulation of sports competition. I begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians on the land on which we meet and pay my respects to elders, both past, present and emerging. I also extend that respect to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander peoples that might be joining us today. In accordance with the committee's resolution of 31 July 2025, this hearing will be broadcast and proof and official transcripts of the proceedings will be published on the Parliament's website. I remind all present as Chair that I will ensure that the proceedings are conducted orderly, respectful and in a courteous way. Given that most of the committee members are participating remotely and via online, if you wish to ask a question, please use the Signal chat group or the hands up function through WebEx. I remind members of the media for the need for fair and accurate reporting of the proceedings of the committee. I now welcome representatives of Sports Integrity Australia and the Department of Foreign Affairs to give evidence today. For the Hansard record, would you please state your name and the capacity in which you are appearing before the committee?
Dr. Sarah Benson, Chief Executive Officer, Sport Integrity Australia. Good morning or good afternoon.
James Moller, Head of Strategy and International Policy.
Emily Fitton, Legal Director, Sport Integrity Australia.
Lara Hayes, Director, Sports Wagering and Competition Manipulation at Sport Integrity Australia.
Alexandra Perry, Treaties Manager at the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade.
Fantastic, thank you. Although the committee does not require you to give evidence under oath, this hearing is a legal proceeding of the Parliament and therefore has the same standings as the proceedings of the respective houses. The giving of false and misleading evidence is a serious matter and may be regarded as contempt of Parliament. The evidence given today will be recorded by Hansard and attracts parliamentary privilege. It is the responsibility of witnesses to accurately record any questions that may be taken on notice. Would any of you like to make an opening statement before we proceed to a discussion and questions from committee members?
I will. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to address the committee today on the proposed ratification of the Council of Europe Convention on the Manipulation of Sports Competitions. Sport Integrity Australia was established over 5 years ago as the national agency dedicated to safeguarding the integrity of sport in Australia. The agency consolidated multiple integrity functions under one roof to provide a coordinated, proactive and comprehensive approach to threats facing sport. The role of SIA as an independent statutory agency is to prevent and address threats to sport integrity and also coordinate a national approach with a view to achieving fair and honest sporting performance and outcomes, promoting positive conduct on and off the sporting arena, achieving a safe, fair and inclusive sporting environment at all levels, and enhancing the reputation and standing of sport in Australia. Australia's sporting culture is deeply embedded in our national identity. Sport underpins community trust, drives significant economic activity, and connects Australia to global sporting markets and institutions. Competition manipulation, more often referred to as match fixing, and sports betting related corruption are not isolated to domestic issues. They are transnational, technologically sophisticated, and highly profitable, and seek to undermine the integrity of sport. Whilst not widespread in Australia, the threat of match fixing to Australia is high. This is driven predominantly by advancements in technology, the rise of globalised betting markets, and the involvement of organised crime within match fixing. With the major events being hosted within Australia leading up to Brisbane 2032 Olympics and Paralympics, the influx of international athletes and also the high volume betting makes Australia a potential target. The Macklin Convention establishes a global framework for preventing, detecting and sanctioning the manipulation of sports competitions, whilst strengthening the cooperation between governments, sporting bodies, betting operators and law enforcement agencies across both national and international borders. Australia's consideration of ratification was informed by the findings of the 2018 review of Australia's sport integrity arrangements, led by the Honourable James Wood, AO QC. The Wood Review found that while Australia had strong foundations, the existing framework was fragmented and not sufficiently equipped to respond to emerging and transnational integrity threats, specifically match fixing and betting-related corruption. The review recommended a more coordinated national approach and explicitly supported Australia becoming a party to the Macklin Convention as a means of strengthening international cooperation and reinforcing domestic integrity arrangements. Australia signed the Macklin Convention in early 2019, and soon after, Sport Integrity Australia was established in July 2020. I acknowledge the time that has passed since signing the Macklin Convention. To date, progress has included a strong focus on consultation. Through this consultation, Sport Integrity Australia has built strong stakeholder relationships. Sport Integrity Australia has an enduring commitment with a strong path forward to continue embedding obligations under the Macklin Convention. Ratifying the Convention legally binds Australia to a number of obligations. Ratification obligates Australia to criminalise competition manipulation and the use of inside information, which will be achieved through proposed national sport integrity offences by way of an amendment to the Commonwealth Criminal Code 1995. Consultation with stakeholders will continue as the ratification process continues. Ratification will formalise a number of functions and ways of working already performed by Sport Integrity Australia, such as the national platform, serving as an information hub, centrally receiving, analysing and disseminating information on irregular and suspicious bets placed on sports. Through the national platform, Sport Integrity Australia contributes to the detection and disruption of match fixing and betting-related corruption. Internationally, the Macklin Convention has fostered international cooperation through a global network of national platforms for sharing intelligence, called the Group of Copenhagen. In December 2025, Sport Integrity Australia's Head of Strategy and International Policy was appointed to the Group of Copenhagen Bureau and will play an important role in further enhancing the national platforms network, global response to threats, and supporting capacity building initiatives and research. Ratifying the Convention also aligns with the aims of Australia's sports diplomacy strategy, which positions the nation to take advantage of the opportunities presented by increased international interest in Australian sporting excellence during and beyond this green and gold decade, whilst building a protective ecosystem around Australian sport. Ratifying the Convention would further contribute to strengthening Australia's leadership in sport globally and underpins our commitment to ensuring sport remains fair and transparent. As a global sporting leader, it is important for Australia to ensure integrity frameworks are robust, fair and transparent. Ratifying the Macklin Convention will demonstrate Australia's commitment to international best practice, contribute to global integrity efforts and proactively protect sport in Australia from corruption. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that opening statement. It is a different treaty that is coming before us, but one that looks like it's been been enforced for some time. I guess it's sort of the area where my first question is about. So this treaty was first open to signatures in 2014 and it officially took effect in 2019. Why is it only coming to us now? Can you talk us through the history about why now?
Yep. Thank you, Chair. I will start off and then pass to my colleagues. So as I mentioned in the opening statement, we became a signatory in February 2019. Also out of the Wood Review was the recommendation to stand up Sport Integrity Australia as an agency, and that occurred, as I said, in July 2020. Now, in standing up a new agency and amalgamating agencies and functions from three different different organisations, there was a phased approach to standing up the agency. And at the same time, a number of things were being put in place. And also during that period, particularly 2019, 2020, the impacts of COVID certainly impacted and resulted in some of the protracted timeframes. So whilst you absolutely acknowledge the timeframe that's occurred, the ratification milestones over this period have been consistent. Some have been delayed and protracted, but the foundations, the compliance and the ratification progress has, slowly progressed over that period. I think one of the things that we're really mindful of but positions us well moving forward is the deep consultation with stakeholders that has occurred, just so that we all understand what the implications, real or perceived, are with respect to the new convention, and that too has taken time. But I'll pass to my colleagues to further expand on that. There is a full timeline there, but I've provided a bit of an overview there just to explain where we're at now as an agency.
Yeah, thank you. I'd probably only add, in terms of being compliant, it is a complex convention from what we understand, and in terms of being compliant, as Dr Benson mentioned, national match fixing laws are required. And that has taken some time. So drafting that, obviously that extensive stakeholder engagement to making sure those offences are fit for purpose, are compliant with the convention, and also complement the existing framework we have in place in this country. So we have state and territory offences for match fixing. This is about strengthening that environment.
And that actually leads into my next question. So currently, without this convention and without these changes to law, what happens? So we've had various media investigations, journalists kind of exposing this to be a challenge for us in Australia. It's not immune to Europe alone. We have had incidences of this occurring onshore with local sporting games and matches. So what happens currently? Like, where's the gap, and why is this legislation and this treaty going to help fill that gap?
Yeah, I'm happy to kick off and then I'll jump in.
Sure. So the gap exists. I'll take you back to 2011. We had a national policy on match fixing in sport. States and territories agreed to bring in consistent match fixing legislation. That didn't happen, so not all states and territories brought in legislation. Those that didn't bring in consistent legislation. So the gaps that exist include, for example, in some jurisdictions, the offences don't apply extraterritorially. So if there's no nexus to the state or territory, they can't take action against potential match fixing. And we have seen sophisticated organised crime syndicates target Australian sport for match fixing. And we have seen limitations in some of those jurisdictions. So not being able to prosecute certain offenders. The purpose here is to bring in legislation that, certainly not to take away from the work of the states and territories. Many of the police forces have done significant work in this space, as you mentioned, Chair. There have been investigations conducted successfully, and that would continue. This is providing, essentially target hardening the environment to provide an extra layer of protection. So where a gap does exist, it would give that ability to target all offenders. As we've seen, match fixing is a global threat. It's very rarely confined to one jurisdiction, and it can't be managed from one jurisdiction. It requires the ability to interact internationally.
Just to jump in, Chair, so as James has highlighted, the main gap identified and the Macklin will bridge this gap is that inconsistent state and territory legislation and regulation through the national sport integrity offences, but it also strengthens and formalises that information sharing both domestically and internationally, which is of significant benefit in being preventative in this space.
Okay, let's go next to Alison. Alison Penfold has a few questions. Member for Lyne, you've got the call.
Thank you very much, Chair. A couple of questions. What entity will be designated as the Australia's national platform?
So Sport Integrity Australia assumed the responsibility for the national platform effective 1st of January 2025, and it was operationalised on the 1st of July 2025, and that will continue in the current arrangement.
Okay, so can I quickly pivot, to basically AI and data protection and privacy? The question really goes to, given that this treaty stems from the Council of Europe, they have far stricter data protections in Australia. Is there any requirement for Australia to match those data protections, given this is essentially started as a European commitment? Because there's quite a gap between where Europe is and we are with their EU general data protection.
That's a great question. I'll pass to James to go through the detail.
No, look, in terms of being compliant with the convention, there's no changes required to data protection. In terms of what information can be shared between national platforms, that obviously is dependent on the jurisdiction. So, for example, in the Australian environment, if suspicious betting were to be reported by a wagering operator, it's reported to AUSTRAC as our financial intelligence unit. There are a whole raft of obligations around the security of that information which wouldn't change. The other thing I'd highlight is as match fixing is criminalised and would be further under this proposal, obviously those law enforcement protections are in place. So as the national platform, we're essentially the international coordination point for referring information. But once that information turns into a police investigation, it's those usual channels of law enforcement engaging through existing networks such as Interpol.
I might just jump.
But we're not, as implementing the treaty, we don't have to change our privacy legislation essentially at this point to be able to meet the obligations of our treaty once we're a signatory.
No, I'll jump in and then I'll pass to Lara. The part of the Macklin working group is establishing a number of committees that sit underneath that, and one of the work priorities that they're working on is developing a toolbox which goes through the principles and guidelines and the data exchange agreement, so we will have full visibility of what those are, and at this stage of the process we won't have to change any localised legislation with respect to that to ensure compliance. But that's not to say along the way we won't identify opportunities to strengthen our agency data protection principles. There's always room for improvement across every agency, I think, and as we learn and as technology comes in, there'll be certainly opportunities to strengthen. I'll just pass to Lara because she might have some detail.
Yeah. No, I just wanted to further strengthen that response and say that Sport Integrity Australia does take our obligations under data privacy and security very seriously. We do have provisions in place to make sure that we will meet those obligations currently, but no, we don't need to change anything at this point in time to be compliant with the convention.
And just one more question: do you have an AI policy? How you utilise AI in terms of identifying match fixing? Because it's both a bit of a double-edged sword, I guess. So I'm interested to know what your views are on that.
Yes, so as an agency, we're in the process of developing a data but also a digital strategy, and that incorporates artificial intelligence both to protect against but also to leverage the power of that to inform our functions as an integrity agency. But if others want to add to that?
Sure. Probably just add that the identification of match fixing or suspicious betting actually happens, generally speaking, by wagering operators. So they're the ones, so in terms of their policies on AI, I can't speak to that, but they have various ways of assessing and analysing their data. They then have various reporting requirements where they do identify something suspicious, and it's that information that we receive. So we're not in receipt of the data to analyse it specifically. We get the referrals and then we make sure they go to the appropriate law enforcement body.
And that's probably an important point, because there have been various iterations of opportunities to strengthen how we function and perform our functions in the competition manipulation space. And the ratification of Macklin is not seeking to have a data vault or a central repository. It is about information sharing. So I guess, that will guide also those policies and protections as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
Great, thanks for that. We will now go to Claire, the member for Sturt. So thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, everyone, for being here this afternoon and for this briefing. Just as best you can, I was interested in hearing about what our compliance with Articles 4, 5 and 9 would look like in reality. I was particularly interested in 9 and how, I get 9B and C, how broad, a compliance measure might be with respect to, I think they're described as sports betting operators. So 4, 5 and 9, but particularly 9.
Just navigate the pack. Respond shortly.
So if I can just talk to Article 9, sorry, if I can just talk to Article 9 for a second, that talks about the regulation of sports betting. As you would be aware, states and territories currently have responsibility for regulating wagering within Australia. And so that article there really speaks to what the states and territories have in place already. As part of our ratification process, we worked with the Office of International Law and the Australian Government Solicitor, and we really interrogated Articles 9 and 10, particularly around what the states and territories currently have in place from a legislative and regulatory perspective to ensure we are compliant with those articles. So at this point in time, there is no changes to that article. Okay. What is currently happening at a state and territory level will be happening from here on in.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's no material
that's
change
helpful.
to that.
Yeah, so existing regimes are compliant, as it were,
Absolutely.
with Article 9.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's the same philosophy for Article 4 and 5.
I'll just go back to that. Bear with us for 1 second.
I can talk to. So in terms of Article 4, domestic coordination, that's that national platform role that we spoke about earlier. So we are already performing that function. In terms of Article 5, cooperation with sports betting operators. So as Lara mentioned, there is the state and territory gambling regulation which occurs. There is also that that federal overlay with AUSTRAC that I mentioned. So wagering operators are already considered reporting entities under anti-money laundering legislation and already have those reporting requirements. So again, no changes. They provide that reporting to AUSTRAC, and then we as the national platform have access to that, as do law enforcement agencies.
Yeah. And if I can just make a further comment on the national platform, particularly in relation to that article. We have established a joint working group on match fixing for major sporting events, which does bring together stakeholders around major sporting events to work together to identify suspicious activity and potential competition manipulation during the event, or in the lead up to and during event time. The working group has been set up recently and will be focusing on the Women's Asian Cup, which is commencing on the 1st of March. So that'll be a really good time for us to be able to test that. But it certainly builds upon the existing relationships, and there's nothing new really that has to happen other than consolidate and formalise those ways of working.
Yeah. Oh, okay, thank you. Just one more question, if I may, Chair. Thank you for that. In the papers provided, it suggests, because what I'm hearing so far is that existing regimes and frameworks and laws, etc., are compliant with what we're proposing to ratify. It does suggest in our papers that Australia must also create laws that criminalise laundering of proceeds of crime relating to sports manipulation, and to consider including sports manipulation within its existing money laundering prevention systems. So that, to me, that suggests that new legislation, laws, frameworks, what have you, is required. Is that right through that context?
That is 100% accurate. Yes, absolutely. So, and we're partway through the process and working through that process, and that's a critical aspect to ensure our compliance. We need those new national sport integrity offences to be in place in order to ensure compliance. So that is the one aspect of implementation that requires that extra additional work and the new approach. And if you want more detail, there will be some more detail to my left or right.
I think in terms of the offences, they are very much focused on criminalising sport integrity or match fixing, competition manipulation and the use of inside information. Existing laws and offences around money laundering and things like that, we will not duplicate. These are very much carved out to be sports specific. So we have done a lot of work consulting with, again, the Office of Parliamentary Counsel, the Australian Government Solicitor, Australian Attorney General's Department and the AFP to ensure that the laws that we are proposing are fit for purpose and they are complementary to existing laws at a Commonwealth level.
Yes, and it's not like we're establishing a new AML
right.
CTF regime that already exists.
It's
ensuring that this fits within the existing framework.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, I'll just check to see if we've got any other questions. I've got a couple of follow-ups before we do. I'll just see. No? Okay.
Lisa, it's
yes.
Tony Xavier. Can you hear me?
Absolutely, Tony. You've got a couple of questions for our witnesses?
Yes, I have, if you don't mind.
The floor is yours.
Thanks, Lisa. Can I just check if the individual states, don't agree with with Australia's side of the convention, or at least don't follow through with the intent of it, where does that leave the ability of the federal government to apply the convention? Given what you said earlier, that individual states have a different way of responding and drafting their laws relating to sports fixing and the like.
Did you want to talk to that, Lara?
Yeah, we can certainly talk to the level of consultation that we have done with states and territories. So as part of the Wood Review, there was extensive consultation with all stakeholders, and states and territories were a key component of that. As I said, also, in relation to Articles 9 and 10 of the Convention, we did interrogate the existing legislation and regulatory frameworks within states and territories and found that there was no additional or obligation on states to do anything differently at this point in time. The feedback that we have got as part of that Wood Review and in the ongoing sort of process of ensuring Australia's compliance and this formal ratification process, states and territories have been supportive of us ratifying the Convention. So I don't at this time foreshadow any pushback from states and territories. We will continue to engage with them in an ongoing manner as we continue to mature all of these pieces of work, the national platform, the implementation of the offences, and also just making sure that a joined-up approach to address that patchwork framework at the moment will continue.
Thank you. And the other question was, given that there's other countries that I understand have now ratified the Convention, and I don't know how long ago they did that, have we been able to learn anything from those countries that have already implemented and ratified the Convention?
Yeah, I can talk to that.
James will talk to that.
Absolutely. So we are part of what's called the Group of Copenhagen. So that is a network of national platforms. So other signatories have all joined this group essentially for information sharing. So the whole point of that network is to learn from others, but also to share intelligence on match fixing. As we talked about earlier, it's an international problem, and it requires input from ideally as many countries as possible. So we certainly engage with other countries. Different countries have had a different pathway in terms of ratification. We obviously have a federated model here, so hence the requirement for national match fixing legislation. Some countries without that state and territory jurisdiction might have had a different approach, but for us that is the one thing that we need.
But have we learnt anything from what any other country has done in terms of what sort of legislation we should have in place and how to ensure that it's effective?
I think one of the things that's quite interesting is that Australia has always been quite at the fore of these efforts to combat match fixing and competition manipulation internationally. We were certainly part of the group that drafted the Macklin Convention. I'm not aware of very many other countries, and I'll defer to James for clarity, that do have these sophisticated match fixing or offence regime in place. So I think Australia is always sort of at the fore of this, and other countries actually look to us in terms of what our efforts are and what our focuses are, which is why I think, again, for us to continue the process of ratification is very important to us internationally from a reputational but also from a leadership perspective. So it's a really good point, and I think that Group of Copenhagen and that national platform mechanism, as we mature with that and engage more internationally, will certainly help us with the way we do mature and operationalise our work. But yeah, I think that, yeah, sorry, I don't want to talk to Tom, but does that answer you?
And just lastly, Sports Integrity Australia was established some 5 years ago. Have there been any cases detected and prosecuted for match fixing since Sports Integrity Australia was established?
I'll pass to James to talk to the ones in the public domain.
Yeah, thank you. There absolutely have. I just would not want to overstate Sport Integrity Australia's role in that. So as the national platform, we coordinate the response to match fixing, but we don't investigate and prosecute it. So we have seen... The examples that I can talk to are in the public domain. We obviously can't talk to any operational activities, but certainly we have, and we have played a role in terms of receiving intelligence from overseas. It's come to us as that national platform. We've referred it to the relevant police force, and they've conducted an investigation and prosecution.
No worries. Thanks, Lisa.
Thanks very much, Tony. Just as a follow-on from Mr Zappia's comments and taking on board that there's probably some cases that you can't refer to because they are currently under active investigation and potential prosecution. We know from one of the submissions we received that there has been a challenge in community football. I was wondering if you could highlight any other sports of concern. I mean, anecdotally, I've always heard things around tennis, but, you know, like you do as an MP, you say, you know, report it to the police if you've got concerns. But I do note that you have engaged extensively with quite a few sporting bodies, but are there any codes that you're particularly concerned about?
We haven't seen the submission, so I'm not sure about the one you're referring to specifically, but certainly I can talk generally to it, and it might be helpful just to explain the environment more broadly. So Australian sport is hugely popular for wagering, but not just domestically, internationally. And so what we do see are significant global gambling markets and pools of money bet on our sports. And when that happens in illegal markets that we have no control over, it can happen to a very low level. So we can see betting markets on our amateur level sport, on our under 18s and below level sport. So that's for one, our concern is generally that illegal betting space where we have less visibility, which is again a benefit of ratifying the convention. In terms of sports that are at risk, I don't necessarily want to call out specific sports, but it's generally those ones that are hugely popular in the international environment. So those sports that have significant interest generally see large volumes wagered on them, and it's not necessarily relevant whether Australians are betting on them or not. So we have seen an example in Victoria many years ago where an organised crime syndicate targeted Victorian football or soccer. The wagering was entirely offshore. There was wagering domestically, but to a very low level, and it wasn't suspicious. The match-fixing syndicate was based offshore, but the athletes were in Australia, the matches were in Victoria. So in that instance, police were able to take action, but due to the limitations of the legislation in that jurisdiction, they weren't able to target all of the offenders involved. So a really good case study as to the risk and how this convention can help in response.
And just on who you consulted with, I know that you did consult with Responsible Wagering Australia, and we have invited them to appear before us as one of the witnesses. Did you also consult with any of the alliances around gambling reform? Did you invite them? Did they choose not to participate? Alliances like the Alliance for Gambling Reform, the one that's headed up by Reverend Tim Costello.
No, we haven't explicitly engaged with those stakeholders. Our focus is very much on the sport integrity outcomes and aligning with the Macklin Convention, which is very much to focus on the sport integrity outcomes and the nexus between match fixing and betting-related corruption. So no, we haven't.
Okay, we've invited them to come to our, to give evidence in our inquiry, just to see if they've got a view on the treaty that is before us at the moment. I just wanted to see from my other colleagues whether they've got any questions. Doesn't look like it, so I will just double check. Okay, great. I've just got a few concluding remarks before we finish this hearing for today. So just a moment, I'll find my page. Okay, thank you for your attendance here today. You will be sent a copy of the transcript of your evidence and will have the opportunity to request corrections to transcript errors. If you've been asked to provide any additional information, would you please forward to the Secretariat by close of business Friday 27 February 2026. And on that note, if there's no further questions or comments, I declare this hearing closed and this meeting closed. Thank you everyone for your attendance today.